The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of golden sand under a burning sun. Few dared to walk its dunes without guidance, but Tomas, a young and determined archaeologist, moved with confidence. He had spent months studying maps and ancient texts, searching for a site that might still hold secrets of the past. His companion, Elena, a careful and intelligent assistant, followed close behind, her eyes scanning the sand for even the smallest clue. For weeks, they had walked over dry land, uncovering small fragments of pottery, broken statues, and faded markings in the sand. Many days offered nothing, but Tomas believed the desert kept its secrets hidden until the right person came along. That morning, as the sun rose in a pale orange sky, he noticed a faint outline in the sand. It looked different from the usual patterns left by wind. He knelt and brushed away the top layer, revealing the corner of a stone. Eleanor crouched beside him, her fingers gently clearing more sand. "Tomas, this looks old," she said, her voice full of excitement. The stone was smooth and cold, and it had strange markings that neither of them recognized. Tomas's heart raced. He knew that even small discoveries could lead to something much bigger. Carefully, they continued digging, revealing a structure beneath the sand. The stone walls formed the entrance to a tomb, small but clearly important. The markings on the doorway were unlike anything recorded in previous archaeological records. Tomas traced the symbols with his fingers, feeling a strange sense of connection to the people who had built it thousands of years ago. This could be a tomb from a forgotten era, Tomas said, standing and brushing the sand from his clothes. "We need to proceed carefully. This might be our chance to uncover something no one has ever seen." Elena nodded. She had learned to trust Tomas's instincts. Together, they set up their equipment, taking notes and photographing every detail before moving inside. The entrance was narrow, but it opened into a larger chamber. The air inside was cool and dry, a welcome relief from the scorching heat outside. Dust floated in the sunlight that filtered through cracks in the ceiling, giving the room an almost magical glow. At the center of the chamber lay the most astonishing sight they had ever seen. A perfectly preserved mummy rested on a stone slab. Its wrappings were intact, golden patterns shining faintly in the dim light. Tomas and Elena exchanged a glance, their excitement barely contained. This was no ordinary find. The markings on the wrappings were unlike any they had studied before. Elena carefully examined the inscriptions. "These symbols do not match any known pharaohs," she said softly. Tomas nodded, his eyes scanning the walls. Hieroglyphs covered the stone, but some looked unfamiliar, as if they belonged to a civilization lost to time. He knew they had found something extraordinary, something that could change history. As they worked, Tomas found small artifacts beside the mummy, jars filled with unknown powders, tiny statues, and tools that seemed advanced for their time. Each object told a story, hinting at a life that had been rich in culture and knowledge. They realized this tomb had belonged to someone very important. "Who do you think this was?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tomas shook his head. "I don't know yet, but whoever they were powerful, and they left messages for us, waiting to be discovered." The discovery brought a mixture of awe and responsibility. They documented every detail, careful not to touch anything unnecessarily. Tomas knew that mistakes could destroy evidence that had survived thousands of years. Hours passed as they worked, but neither felt tired. The desert outside was harsh, but inside the tomb, time seemed to stand still. At one point, Tomas noticed a faint crack in the wall behind the mummy. He tapped it gently, and a small section shifted, revealing a narrow passage. Elena leaned closer. "It looks like there's more," she said. Tomas's heart skipped a beat. The tomb was larger than they had imagined, and it promised even more secrets. They spent the next few hours examining the passage. The walls were carved with symbols similar to those on the mummy's wrappings. The carvings told stories of battles, celebrations, and journeys across distant lands. Tomas realized that this tomb was not only a resting place, but also a record of a life that had mattered deeply to a civilization now forgotten. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. painting the desert in shades of pink and gold. Tomas and Elena emerged briefly to rest and make notes in their journal. The sight of the endless dunes reminded them of the fragility of human life. Compared to the enduring power of history, the tomb would survive, waiting for the world to understand it. As night fell, they returned to camp, careful to protect the tomb from wind and sand. Tomas could not sleep, thinking of the mummy and the secrets it held. He knew that the coming days would bring challenges, but also discoveries that could change everything historians believed about the past. Elena, too, lay awake, her mind racing, with possibilities. In the quiet desert night, under a sky filled with stars, the tomb rested undisturbed. Its golden pattern shimmered faintly, as if aware that its story was about to be told. Tomas and Elena were ready to uncover it, piece by piece. Knowing that history was alive in that hidden chamber, the desert had kept its secret for centuries. But now, it was time for the world to listen. The first light of dawn spilled across the desert, casting a soft glow over Tomas and Elena's camp. The discovery of the tomb had kept them awake most of the night, their minds buzzing with questions about the mummy and the strange symbols they had seen. Today, they planned to begin the careful work of examining the scrolls found alongside the mummy. Tomas approached the tomb's entrance with a mix of excitement and caution. He knew that ancient scrolls were fragile and could easily be damaged. Elena followed, carrying a small wooden box filled with soft cloths and brushes for careful handling. They entered the chamber, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone walls. The mummy lay in its resting place, undisturbed and solemn, while the scrolls rested nearby, tied with delicate cords. Tomas carefully untied the first scroll. It felt surprisingly smooth and strong, as if the papyrus had resisted the passage of centuries. He unrolled it slowly, revealing lines of elegant writing in black and red ink. Elena leaned in, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar symbols. "These are not like any hieroglyphs I have seen before," she said. "Some of them are similar to known scripts, but others are completely new." Tomas nodded. "It looks like a mixture. Perhaps it was a form of writing used by a small kingdom that history forgot. Whoever wrote this was very skilled. Every line has meaning and purpose." As they worked together, the scrolls began to reveal their story. They described a queen named Neferia, a ruler of a kingdom previously unknown to modern historians. The text told of her wisdom, her careful leadership, and her efforts to bring peace and prosperity to her people. Neferia had built temples, schools, and libraries, and she had sent explorers to distant lands to learn about other cultures. Elena's eyes widened as she read aloud a passage describing Neferia's knowledge of medicine and plants. She knew how to heal people with herbs, and she recorded cures that were advanced for her time. She said. Tomas ran his fingers over the text, imagining a world where this queen had guided her people with intelligence and care. The scrolls also describe astronomy. Neferia had studied the stars and recorded their movements with surprising accuracy. Charts and diagrams showed how she tracked the sun, moon, and planets. Tomas realized that some of her observations were even more precise than those made by civilizations that followed her. The queen had clearly valued knowledge and wanted it to survive. As they continued translating, Tomas noticed that some scrolls contained maps. They showed trade routes and connections between distant lands. Elena pointed to one map that depicted a journey across a desert and a river, with symbols indicating places rich in resources. These could explain how her kingdom became so powerful. She said she knew the value of trade and cooperation with neighbors. Hours passed as they carefully documented every scroll. Tomas and Elena worked slowly, knowing that any mistake could destroy centuries of information. They made copies of the symbols, wrote notes in their journals, and took photographs to preserve the details. The tomb had become a library of lost knowledge, waiting for the world to understand it. During a brief break, Tomas looked around the chamber, taking in the carvings on the walls and the objects around the mummy. Every piece told a story. The jars with powders, the small statues, and the tools hinted at a society that valued science, art, and spirituality. He realized that Neferia had lived in a time when wisdom was as important as power, and she had worked to ensure her people benefited from both. Elena examined one scroll that seemed different from the others. Its text was written in a flowing style, with illustrations of people, animals, and buildings. She smiled as she showed it to Tomas. This scroll describes daily life in Neferia's kingdom. It is not just about rulers and battles. It shows how ordinary people lived, what they ate, what they wore, and how they celebrated festivals. Tomas studied the illustrations. Farmers worked in fields with advanced irrigation systems. Children played games in open courtyards, and craftsmen shaped tools and jewelry with skill. She cared about her people, he said softly. She wanted them to live well and learn. That is why she left these scrolls. She wanted her knowledge to survive. As the day passed, Tomas and Elena began to see a pattern in the scrolls. Neferia had organized her kingdom carefully, using intelligence and strategy. She had written instructions for rulers who would come after her, describing how to govern fairly, manage resources, and protect her people. Tomas realized that this was more than a historical record. It was a guide, a message across time from a queen who had hoped the world would remember her wisdom. The excitement of discovery was tempered by the responsibility they felt. Tomas knew that once the scrolls left the tomb, the information could be lost or misinterpreted. He decided that their first step would be to translate every word as accurately as possible. Only then could they begin to share Neferia's story with historians and the world. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the chamber, Tomas and Elena paused to reflect. They had uncovered a queen whose name had been forgotten, a kingdom that had vanished from history, and knowledge that could change everything scholars believed about the past. The scrolls were more than documents. They were a window into a lost civilization, and Tomas and Elena were the first to look through it in thousands of years. Elena carefully retied the scrolls and placed them in the box for safekeeping. Tomas glanced at the mummy, whose golden patterns gleamed faintly in the fading light. He felt a deep respect for the queen who had lived so long ago. Her wisdom had endured, and now it would guide a new generation of historians and explorers. That night, under the stars, Tomas and Elena camped near the tomb. The desert was quiet, and the wind whispered through the dunes. Tomas could not stop thinking about the scrolls and the secrets they held. He knew that the days ahead would be filled with discoveries, challenges, and questions that demanded careful thought. But he also knew that they had found something extraordinary. The tomb had revealed its first secret, and it promised more. The queen's story was just beginning to be told, and the world would soon learn that history had been incomplete. Tomas and Elena fell asleep under the vast desert sky, dreaming of a past that had waited silently for centuries, ready to speak through the words of a forgotten queen. The morning sun rose over the desert, painting the dunes with soft gold and orange hues. Tomas and Elena returned to the tomb with renewed energy. After days of translating the scrolls, they were eager to explore the hidden passage Tomas had discovered behind the mummy. The previous evening's excitement had kept them awake, imagining what secrets the passage might conceal. Elena held a lantern as Tomas gently cleared the sand and dust from the narrow entrance. The passage was small, barely wide enough for them to move comfortably, but it descended deeper into the earth. The air was cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of stone and ancient oils. Tomas took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of curiosity and respect for the people who had built this place. This must have been meant for only a few to see, Tomas said quietly. Not everyone would have been allowed here. It feels like a secret chamber built to protect something very important. Elena nodded. Perhaps these were treasures or knowledge meant to survive the centuries. Only the right people could find them. They moved carefully down the passage, their footsteps echoing softly. The walls were smooth, carved with symbols similar to those on the mummy's wrappings and the scrolls. Tomas noticed that some carvings glowed faintly in the light of his lantern. It was as if the stone itself remembered the queen who had ruled so long ago. At the end of the passage, they entered a larger chamber. The room was filled with golden artifacts, statues, and objects they could not immediately identify. The glow from the lantern reflected off the walls, revealing intricate carvings and murals. Every surface seemed to tell a story. Elena gasped. Softly, "This is incredible. I have never seen anything like this before. These items must have belonged to Queen Neferia herself." Tomas examined a golden statue at the center of the room. It depicted the queen holding a small device in her hands. The device was shaped like a sphere with lines and markings, almost like a miniature star map. Tomas's eyes widened. "This is remarkable. It looks like she studied the stars, perhaps. She used this to track celestial movements or guide her kingdom." Elena carefully picked up a small artifact shaped like a cylinder. On its surface were carvings similar to the scrolls. "Look at this," she said. These symbols matched the ones describing her knowledge of medicine and agriculture. It seemed she recorded everything in multiple ways to make sure it survived. As they explored the chamber, Tomas noticed a section of the wall that looked different from the rest. The stones were fitted tightly, almost as if they were a door. He pressed gently, and a small panel shifted, revealing another hidden space. This inner chamber was smaller, but even more extraordinary. It contained scrolls, jars filled with powders, and instruments that looked like tools for astronomy and science. Elena's eyes sparkled. She must have been an inventor and a scholar. "These devices are far ahead of her time. We have to study them carefully." Tomas nodded. "It is amazing to think that centuries ago, someone had knowledge we are just beginning to understand." This chamber was meant to preserve her wisdom. They spent hours examining the hidden chamber. Tomas sketched the artifacts, while Elena carefully noted the markings and diagrams. Every object told a story of intelligence, creativity, and care. The queen had not only ruled her people, but had also sought to leave lessons for future generations. As they worked, Tomas noticed that some of the carvings on the walls seemed to form a map of the tomb and the surrounding land. Elena traced the lines with her fingers. This might show where she stored her treasures and where important locations in her kingdom were. It could explain how she maintained her power and influence. Tomas considered the implications. The hidden chambers were not just storage for gold and art. They were archives of knowledge, carefully protected so that only someone with skill and respect could access them. Queen Neferia had planned for the survival of her wisdom, long before historians would ever hear her name. Even as they documented the chamber, Tomas and Elena felt the weight of responsibility. Every artifact, every scroll, every carving had survived thousands of years. One wrong move could destroy centuries of knowledge. They handled each object with care, fully aware that they were the first people to see these treasures in generations. By afternoon, the sun had shifted, sending golden beams into the tomb through cracks in the ceiling. Tomas and Elena paused to rest, sitting near the lanterns they had set down. The chamber felt alive with history. Tomas could almost imagine the queen herself walking through these halls, arranging her scrolls, guiding her people, and protecting her knowledge for the future. Elena spoke quietly. "I think she wanted us to find this. The way everything is preserved. It is like she left a path for those who were curious enough and careful enough to discover it." Tomas smiled. "Yes, it is as if she reached out across time. Her story was meant to be told, and now we are here to tell it." As evening approached, they carefully packed their notes and sketches. They could not take the artifacts out of the tomb, but documenting them in detail was the first step toward sharing Neferia's story with the world. Tomas covered the hidden chamber with protective cloths to keep the sand and wind from disturbing it. Elena did the same, making sure every scroll and object was safe outside. The desert wind had cooled, and the stars began to appear one by one. Tomas and Elena set up a small camp near the tomb. The discovery of the hidden chambers had deepened their understanding of the queen and her kingdom. The tomb was no longer just a resting place for a mummy. It was a library, a laboratory, and a museum, preserved through the centuries. Tomas lay back and looked at the sky. He thought of Queen Neferia and her wisdom. The hidden chambers had revealed her intelligence, her curiosity, and her foresight, She had been more than a ruler. She had been a teacher and a protector of knowledge. Elena, sitting beside him, whispered, "The more we learn, the more we realize how much we do not know. This is only the beginning." Tomas nodded. The hidden chambers promised more discoveries, more secrets, and more lessons about a civilization that history had almost forgotten. The tomb held answers that could change what the world believed about the past. Tomas and Elena had only just begun to understand the queen who had waited so long to be remembered. That night, under the desert stars, the hidden chambers rested quietly, their treasures saved for centuries more. Tomas and Elena fell asleep, dreaming of maps, scrolls, and golden artifacts. The tomb had revealed its first layers of secrets, and the adventure of discovery was only beginning. The desert had kept its mysteries for generations, but now they had begun to speak through the courage and curiosity of two explorers who believed in history's power to surprise the world. The desert was quiet in the early morning, with only the sound of wind brushing across the dunes. Tomas and Elena had spent the night reviewing their notes from the hidden chambers, the discoveries of the golden artifacts, scrolls, and advanced devices had filled them with excitement, but now a new feeling crept into their minds. They sensed that the tomb's secrets might attract more than just curious historians. As they prepared to return to the tomb, Tomas noticed movement in the distance. Figures appeared on the dunes, moving slowly but deliberately. Elena squinted. "Tomas, do you see them?" she whispered. He nodded. "Yes, we are not alone." The two explorers quickly gathered their equipment and prepared for a cautious approach. They knew that valuable discoveries could draw attention from those who might want to exploit them. Rather than preserve them, the figures approached cautiously, revealing themselves as men in plain clothes, carrying minimal equipment. They were not hostile at first glance, but their presence was deliberate. Tomas stepped forward and called out, "Hello, can we help you?" The men paused, exchanging quiet words. One of them, older than the others and with a sharp gaze, stepped forward. "We are historians and guardians of ancient knowledge," he said calmly. "We have been tracking this tomb for decades. You must understand the importance of what you have discovered." Tomas and Elena exchanged glances. "We understand," Tomas replied, "but we are documenting everything carefully. We mean no harm to the tomb or its contents." The older man nodded, but there was caution in his eyes. "That is good. Many have come seeking treasures without understanding their value. You must be careful. Knowledge like this can change history, and not everyone is prepared for it." After the men left, Tomas and Elena returned to the tomb with heightened awareness. They understood that their discovery had drawn attention, and they would need to be vigilant to protect the artifacts and scrolls. The weight of responsibility pressed upon them, but it also strengthened their resolve to uncover the truth inside the tomb. The hidden chambers seemed even more alive with history. Tomas carefully examined a small device shaped like a celestial sphere. Its markings matched the scrolls that described nefarious studies of the stars. He realized that the queen had not only tracked planets and constellations, but had also developed a method for predicting seasonal changes, which would have helped her kingdom survive droughts and floods. Elena studied the scrolls describing trade routes and diplomatic alliances. Her kingdom was connected to lands far beyond Egypt, she said. These alliances explain why she was so powerful. She shared knowledge with others, and in return, her people benefited from new ideas and goods. As they pieced together the information, Tomas noticed that some scrolls contained hidden messages. Written between the lines of the main text were details of strategies for protecting the tomb and preserving its knowledge. Neferia anticipated that people might try to misuse her discoveries, Tomas said. She left instructions to ensure that only those with respect and skill could understand them. Elena smiled. She was thinking centuries ahead. It is incredible that she planned for the survival of her wisdom this carefully. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tomas and Elena prepared to leave the tomb for the night. They camped nearby, but their thoughts were full of questions. Who were the people that had approached them earlier? What else had the queen hidden to protect her knowledge? and how far-reaching was the influence of her civilization while they rested. Tomas reviewed the maps and charts they had documented. Some of the locations marked on the scrolls were unfamiliar, suggesting settlements and routes previously unknown to modern historians. The Queen had clearly led a civilization that was far more advanced and interconnected than anyone had imagined. Elena, unable to sleep, examined a scroll that described the Queen's lineage. The DNA traces, carefully recorded in her time, hinted at connections with other rulers thought to be unrelated. Her people were more connected than we knew, she said softly. Her kingdom might have influenced regions we never expected. The night was calm, but Tomas and Elena felt a growing sense of urgency. The discovery of the tomb and the Queen's knowledge had opened doors that could never be closed. They were not just uncovering history, they were entering a story that had been hidden for thousands of years, and others might try to control or misinterpret it. The next morning, they returned to the tomb with renewed focus. They carefully examined a mural depicting a council of leaders. Each figure held an object representing their specialty, such as medicine, agriculture, or astronomy. Tomas realized that Neferia had surrounded herself with advisors who shared her vision, creating a kingdom built on cooperation and wisdom rather than fear or power alone. Elena traced the figures with her fingers. She must have believed in learning from everyone. That is why her knowledge lasted so long. She did not keep it to herself. As they continued their work, they uncovered additional chambers hidden behind false walls. These smaller rooms contained everyday objects, clothing, and personal items of the Queen and her family. Tomas noted that even these items were carefully preserved, showing a level of care that spoke to the Queen's character. She valued both her people and their history, ensuring that every detail would tell a story for future generations. Tomas and Elena spent weeks documenting the tomb, but they knew there was more to uncover. The scrolls, the hidden chambers, and the artifacts all pointed to a civilization that had been far more advanced than previously believed. The Queen had left a legacy, and it was their responsibility to protect it until the world was ready to understand it. One afternoon, while examining a set of scrolls, Tomas noticed a faint watermark on the edges of the papyrus. The marks formed symbols that seemed to connect different scrolls, almost like a code. Elena studied them closely. It is a pattern, she said. Perhaps she wanted her knowledge to be discovered gradually in a specific order. Tomas nodded. She wanted careful readers. Those who rushed or ignored details would miss the connections. She trusted that only those with patience and respect could learn her secrets. By the time they left the tomb that evening, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dunes. Tomas and Elena knew that their work was far from finished. The Queen's knowledge was vast, and the tomb held secrets that could change the understanding of history. As they prepared camp, Tomas looked toward the horizon, where the desert met the sky. The shadows of the past were long and complex, but he felt determined. They would continue their work, protect the tomb, and reveal the story of Queen Neferia to the world in a way that honored her wisdom. The desert remained silent, but the tomb's secrets were alive. Tomas and Elena had become part of that story, guardians of knowledge that had waited for centuries. They understood that history was not fixed, and that one discovery could challenge everything scholars had believed under the desert stars. They rested, ready for the days ahead. The shadows of the past had revealed themselves, and Tomas and Elena knew that they were only beginning to understand the true impact of the Queen's legacy. Weeks passed since Tomas and Elena had first entered the tomb. The hidden chambers, scrolls, and artifacts had provided endless hours of study. The Queen's knowledge, preserved for centuries, had been carefully documented. Now, Tomas felt it was time to share their discovery with the world. The story of Queen Neferia was too important to remain hidden in the desert. Elena carefully packed their notes, sketches, and photographs, ensuring that every detail was preserved. Tomas checked the scrolls and artifacts again. We must make this presentation perfect, he said. The world needs to understand not only what we found, but why it matters. They traveled to Cairo, where a conference of historians and archaeologists would gather to hear their findings. The journey was long, but Tomas and Elena discussed every discovery along the way. They spoke of the Queen's wisdom, her maps, her astronomical studies, and the advanced knowledge of medicine and agriculture she had recorded. Both knew that this story would change what historians had believed for centuries. When they arrived, the hall was filled with scholars, journalists, and officials. Tomas and Elena were nervous, but they felt the weight of responsibility and the excitement of sharing a discovery that had waited thousands of years to be revealed. Tomas began the presentation, showing images of the tomb, the mummy, and the hidden chambers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we have uncovered a tomb belonging to a previously unknown queen named Neferia. Her kingdom existed at the same time as other famous rulers, but her achievements have been forgotten until now. The tomb contains scrolls, artifacts, and devices that reveal her knowledge of medicine, astronomy, governance, and trade. This discovery changes our understanding of history." Elena displayed the scrolls, pointing out illustrations of the Queen's studies and records of daily life in her kingdom. Queen Neferia valued her people and their knowledge, she said. She built libraries, schools, and tools to preserve wisdom for future generations. These discoveries show a civilization far more advanced than we believed. Questions came quickly from the audience. Scholars asked about the authenticity of the scrolls, the meaning of the symbols, and the connections to other known kingdoms. Tomas and Elena answered carefully, explaining the methods they had used to translate and preserve the documents. They showed diagrams, photographs, and comparisons with other historical records. One historian asked, "Are you certain these artifacts are from the same time as other Egyptian rulers? Could this be a later creation?" Tomas shook his head. "We have carbon dated the materials, studied the craftsmanship, and analyzed the symbols. Everything points to a contemporary era with rulers like the pharaohs. This was a kingdom that existed but was lost from historical records until now." Elena added, "The maps and charts show trade routes, alliances, and diplomatic strategies. Queen Neferia's kingdom influenced lands beyond Egypt. This shows that civilizations were more interconnected than we previously thought." As the presentation continued, excitement grew in the room. Historians whispered to each other, realizing that the discovery challenged long-held assumptions. The mummy's golden patterns, the hidden chambers, and the scrolls all revealed a level of sophistication that was astonishing. After the conference, Tomas and Elena were approached by a group of scholars eager to study the findings further. They were invited to collaborate with universities and museums around the world. The Queen's legacy was spreading quickly, and her story was being rewritten into history books for future generations. Later that evening, Tomas and Elena walked along the streets of Cairo, reflecting on the day. "I never imagined the world would react this strongly," Elena said. "People are seeing how much we were missing. It is incredible to think that one tomb can change history." Tomas smiled. "Queen Neferia left us a gift. Her knowledge was meant to survive, and now it will inspire a new understanding of the past. We were lucky to find it, but the credit belongs to her. She prepared this for the future, and we are only the messengers." As the days passed, media outlets shared the discovery with the public. Articles, photographs, and interviews explained who Queen Neferia was and why her kingdom mattered. School books began to include sections on her achievements, showing students the importance of knowledge, wisdom, and planning. Tomas and Elena watched as historians revised timelines and maps to include Neferia's contributions. Meanwhile, they continued studying the artifacts and scrolls. Some items had not yet been fully understood, and new questions arose about the Queen's methods and the technology she had developed. Tomas and Elena realized that every discovery led to another, creating a chain of knowledge that stretched across centuries. One afternoon, Elena discovered a scroll that described a celestial device in detail. It contained instructions for tracking stars and planets, predicting seasonal changes, and even measuring the distance of the sun. Tomas examined it carefully. "This knowledge is remarkable," he said. She understood the world in ways that people centuries later only began to explore. Her studies were practical and scientific, not just symbolic. Elena nodded. It shows that she wanted her people to thrive. She combined wisdom, science, and leadership. That is why her kingdom lasted so long and influenced so many others. The world's reaction to the discovery continued to grow. Museums requested exhibitions, universities asked for lectures, and scholars traveled to see the tomb firsthand. Tomas and Elena coordinated these efforts, ensuring that the tomb was protected while sharing its story. They understood that the queen had planned for this moment, leaving clues, tools, and instructions to guide those who approached with respect and care. By the end of the month, history books were changing. Queen Nephiria's story was being added alongside famous pharaohs. Her contributions recognized in medicine, astronomy, agriculture, and diplomacy. Tomas and Elena felt proud, knowing that their careful work had honored the queen's legacy. One evening, they returned to the tomb. The desert was quiet. With only the wind and the stars to accompany them, Tomas knelt before the mummy, tracing the golden patterns with his hand. She trusted us to tell her story, he said softly. We have done our best, but there is still more to learn. Elena placed a hand on his shoulder, and we will continue. Her knowledge is too important to stop now. The world is listening, and she will guide us forward. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the desert and the tomb's treasures, Tomas and Elena felt the full weight of their discovery. The queen's wisdom had survived thousands of years, and now it would shape the future. History had been incomplete, but through their efforts, it was beginning to make sense. The desert held its secrets, but it had allowed them to shine. Queen Nephiria's story had been revealed, and the world would never forget her name. After the world had heard the story of Queen Nephiria, Tomas and Elena returned to the tomb with renewed determination. While the public knew the main discoveries, the tomb still held secrets that had not yet been fully understood. The queen had left clues, tools, and scrolls that hinted at knowledge beyond what they had already revealed. As they entered the hidden chambers, Tomas carefully lit lanterns to illuminate the room. The golden artifacts gleamed softly, casting reflections on the walls. Elena placed the scrolls on a clean cloth, opening one that seemed different from the others. Its symbols were arranged in patterns, almost like a puzzle, rather than just a written record. This is unusual, Elena said. It looks like she hid information in these symbols. Not everything is written directly. Some knowledge is encoded. Tomas studied the scroll carefully. Nephiria wanted only those who were patient and observant to discover these secrets. She planned for people to think, to analyze, and to learn from her carefully. They began to decode the symbols, connecting them to the artifacts and devices. In the hidden chambers, the process was slow, requiring precision and careful thought. Yet, with each pattern they solved, more of the queen's wisdom revealed itself. Some scrolls described advanced irrigation systems that allowed crops to thrive in harsh climates. Others outlined strategies for building durable structures that could withstand natural disasters. Elena discovered a diagram that appeared to represent a celestial device, similar to the one found in the hidden chamber. The instructions were precise, detailing how to measure the positions of the sun, moon, and stars. Tomas realized that Nephiria had combined astronomy with practical planning. Her kingdom had not only survived but flourished because of her careful observations and understanding of nature. While examining a set of small statues, Elena noticed markings on the bases that corresponded with the scrolls. Each symbol seemed to represent a different field of knowledge: medicine, agriculture, astronomy, trade, and governance. She wanted people to see the connections, Elena said. All her knowledge was connected, like a web. Understanding one part helps you understand the others. Tomas nodded. It shows that she valued learning as a whole. Wisdom was not just for rulers or scholars. It was for everyone, for the benefit of her kingdom. As they continued, Tomas discovered a sealed jar tucked in a corner. Its contents were preserved perfectly: powders, pigments, and materials that Nephiria had used in experiments or for practical applications. Some powders appeared to be medicinal, others were used for creating dyes or inks. Tomas and Elena carefully documented each item, realizing that the queen had left a complete record of her work. While translating another scroll, Elena uncovered a hidden message. It described an alliance between Neferia's kingdom and a distant civilization across the sea. This connection suggested that knowledge had been shared, spreading ideas and innovations beyond the boundaries of Egypt. Tomas realized that the queen's influence had been broader than historians had imagined. Her kingdom had not existed in isolation. It had shaped other societies through trade, culture, and knowledge. Elena traced the lines on an old map, showing possible routes taken by explorers sent by Neferia. She had people traveling far and wide, she said. Her kingdom was connected to lands we never thought it was. This changes everything we know about ancient trade and communication. Tomas examined the hidden chambers once more. The arrangement of artifacts, scrolls, and diagrams suggested that Neferia had designed the tomb not only as a resting place, but also as a learning center. Those who discovered it could gain wisdom if they approached it carefully and with respect. The queen had left lessons for future generations, ensuring that her knowledge would survive even after her kingdom had vanished. Elena picked up a small scroll that contained instructions for experiments in plant growth and medicine. She was teaching people to solve problems, she said, not just to read her knowledge, but to apply it, to think for themselves. Tomas smiled. She trusted that anyone who found her tomb could learn and grow from it. Her legacy is not just in artifacts or scrolls. It is in the way she inspired thinking and creativity. As the day passed, Tomas and Elena began connecting different discoveries. Patterns emerged in the scrolls, linking agricultural methods with trade strategies, astronomy with construction techniques, and medicine with daily life practices. It became clear that Neferia had created a complete system for managing her kingdom, combining practical skills with wisdom and learning. While studying a mural depicting the queen with advisors and scholars, Elena noticed small details that had previously been overlooked. The mural showed people recording observations, testing ideas, and sharing knowledge. Tomas realized that Neferia had created a culture of learning, ensuring that her people could continue discovering long after her. Elena carefully sketched the mural and compared it with the scrolls. Everything is connected, she said. Her instructions, her experiments, her governance, they are all part of a single plan. She thought about everything, and she planned for the future. By evening, Tomas and Elena had documented a large portion of the tomb, yet they knew there were still hidden chambers, scrolls, and devices waiting to be discovered. Each day revealed more about the queen and her kingdom, and the depth of her knowledge amazed them. Outside, the desert sky glowed with the colors of sunset. Tomas and Elena set up a small camp near the tomb, reflecting on the discoveries. Every day we learn something new, Tomas said. It feels like the queen is speaking to us through her work. Elena nodded. Her wisdom has survived thousands of years. It shows us that knowledge is more important than wealth or power. She created a legacy that teaches us how to live and think. That night, under a sky full of stars, they studied the celestial charts and compared them to modern maps. Tomas realized that Neferia had observed the universe with precision, linking the movements of stars to practical uses for her kingdom. The more they studied, the more they understood the brilliance of her planning and her foresight. Tomas and Elena knew that their work was far from complete. The tomb had many layers of secrets. In every scroll, artifact, and diagram contained lessons waiting to be uncovered. Yet, they also understood that the queen had designed the tomb to guide thoughtful and respectful explorers. Every discovery required careful study, patience, and attention to detail. The desert was quiet, but the tomb was alive with history. Tomas and Elena had become part of a story that had waited centuries to be told. Queen Neferia's knowledge, hidden and protected, was being revealed piece by piece. The world had seen only the beginning, and yet it was already clear that her wisdom could change how humanity understood the past. As they lay down to rest under the stars, Tomas whispered, We are only starting to understand her. The mysteries she left are greater than we imagine, Eleanor replied, and we will continue. Her knowledge deserves to be fully uncovered, and we are here to make sure it survives for generations to come. The dessert remained still, holding the tomb's secrets safely, yet the Queen's legacy was no longer hidden. Through the careful work of Tomas and Elena, the wisdom of a forgotten civilization was beginning to shine again. After months of studying the tomb and its hidden chambers, Tomas and Elena felt a sense of accomplishment. They had uncovered the secrets of Queen Neferia and documented her wisdom in full. The Queen's knowledge had revealed new insights into ancient civilizations, showing that her kingdom had been far more advanced than anyone had realized. Now it was time to share the discoveries with the world in a way that honored her legacy. Tomas and Eleanor prepared the artifacts and scrolls for museum display. Each item was carefully preserved, labeled, and explained so that visitors could understand the knowledge it represented. The golden markings on the mummy, the celestial devices, and the encoded scrolls were all highlighted as examples of Neferia's intelligence and planning. People visiting the exhibition could see how she had combined science, art, governance, and culture into a unified system. When the exhibition opened, it attracted historians, students, and curious visitors from around the world. Scholars were amazed to see the breadth of Neferia's knowledge. Some of the scrolls described irrigation techniques that allowed her kingdom to thrive in desert conditions. Others showed strategies for trade and alliances with distant lands. Every artifact and inscription painted a picture of a ruler who had thought carefully about the future and how to preserve her wisdom for generations. Tomas stood in the exhibition hall, watching visitors study the displays. He felt a deep satisfaction. People are finally seeing what we discovered, he said to Elena. This changes how we understand the past. Neferia was more than a queen. She was a teacher and a visionary. Elena smiled. Her ideas were meant to be shared. She trusted that future generations would value knowledge, and now the world can learn from her. Among the visitors, young students were especially inspired. They studied the diagrams of celestial devices and tried to imagine how people in Neferia's time had measured the stars. Some examined the agricultural scrolls, learning how ancient techniques could be applied to modern farming. Others were fascinated by the maps and trade routes, realizing that long before modern technology, people had connected across vast distances through planning and communication. Tomas noticed a group of historians debating the significance of the Queen's discoveries. Her kingdom was connected to lands we never imagined, one scholar said. It shows that ancient civilizations shared knowledge and influenced each other more than we thought. Elena added, she also created a culture of learning. The murals and artifacts show that she encouraged observation, testing ideas, and sharing knowledge. It was not just about ruling. It was about understanding the world. As weeks passed, more discoveries from the tomb were analyzed. Researchers found that some of Neferia's medicinal formulas could be adapted to modern medicine. Others discovered that her architectural plans could inspire new designs that were both efficient and sustainable. Even astronomers studied the star charts, realizing that the Queen had observed celestial patterns with incredible accuracy. The media covered the story extensively. Articles and documentaries explained how one tomb had rewritten the history of an entire civilization. People everywhere were fascinated by the idea that a forgotten queen had left knowledge that could still teach valuable lessons thousands of years later. Tomas and Elena were interviewed multiple times, sharing their experiences and emphasizing the importance of careful research, respect for the past, and curiosity. In addition to public recognition, the Queen's discoveries inspired other archaeologists to explore lesser-known sites. The idea that history might be incomplete motivated teams to look beyond the famous monuments and pyramids. They realized that hidden tombs and forgotten civilizations could hold knowledge that would change our understanding of human progress. Tomas and Elena also worked with educators to incorporate Neferia's discoveries into school programs. Students studied her strategies for agriculture, trade, and governance as examples of critical thinking and planning. They learn how ancient civilizations had solved problems with creativity and patience. The Queen's story became a model of how knowledge could survive and inspire generations, long after the people who created it were gone. Meanwhile, the mummy itself became a symbol of the enduring power of wisdom. People were fascinated by how well preserved it was and how much information it contained. The golden markings and intricate wrappings were no longer just artifacts. They were messages from the past, carefully designed to guide and teach. Tomas and Elena often returned to the tomb for research, discovering new details each time. The Queen's legacy was alive, waiting for those who were willing to study and understand it. Elena reflected on the journey they had undertaken. "We started with curiosity and determination," she said. "Now, we see the impact of what we found." The Queen trusted that someone would come and uncover her knowledge, and we were the ones who did. But it is not just about us. It is about everyone who learns from her. Tomas agreed. Her vision was larger than her kingdom. She wanted knowledge to survive, to travel through time, and to inspire. She succeeded. People today can learn from her in ways she could never have imagined. As the sun set over the desert, Tomas and Elena stood near the entrance of the tomb. The sands had shifted over centuries, hiding the tomb from the world. Yet its treasures had emerged at the right time. They felt a deep respect for Neferia and the generations of people who had preserved her knowledge before them. The tomb that had once been silent and secret was now alive with understanding. The discoveries of the Queen and her kingdom had changed history. People now knew that ancient civilizations were far more advanced and connected than previously thought. Neferia's wisdom had survived through time, teaching lessons about learning, observation, and careful planning. Tomas and Elena knew that there were still mysteries to uncover. Even with all their research, the Queen had left clues that might take years or even decades to fully understand, yet they felt proud of what had been achieved. The world had gained a new understanding of history, and one tomb in the desert had made it possible. In classrooms, museums, and laboratories, the lessons of Queen Neferia continued to inspire. Children and scholars alike studied her methods, applied her strategies, and marveled at her ingenuity. The world recognized that knowledge, carefully preserved and shared, could change understanding across generations. Tomas turned to Elena and smiled. "We have finished our work, at least for now, but the story of Neferia will continue. Her knowledge will live as long as people are curious and willing to learn." Elena nodded. "Yes, and that is the greatest gift any ruler can leave behind. Not gold or power, but wisdom that changes how people see the world." The desert remained quiet, yet history had been rewritten. The unearthed mummy, once hidden and forgotten, had revealed a civilization rich with knowledge and insight. Queen Neferia's legacy was no longer a mystery. It was a living example of how understanding, creativity, and careful thought could survive through centuries and inspire the world forever. Tomas and Elena walked away from the tomb, knowing that their lives had been changed by the Queen's wisdom. They had witnessed the power of discovery, the value of learning, and the importance of preserving knowledge. The world now knew that one tomb, one queen, and one careful archaeologist could change history forever. And so, the story of Queen Neferia reached the hearts and minds of people everywhere, reminding humanity that the past held lessons that could guide the future, and that true understanding comes to those who seek it patiently and respectfully.